Okay, let's call this meeting to order. So we're calling to order the July 8th, 2020 CPC meeting. We have a agenda everybody's been sent copies of. Depends on how things go. It could be a very long agenda or a very short agenda. So let's look at agenda item number 1, which is a review of the June 10th, 2020 meeting minutes. Meg, you and I just spoke for a couple minutes. I don't know if we need to.
Yeah, so I wasn't able to finish the minutes because I was 15 minutes late to the last meeting, so I had to go back in and rewatch that section I missed. And for whatever reason, on the live stream page, our last few meetings actually I discovered haven't been uploaded, so I wasn't able to watch it. And so I just reached out to Amy and Kip today around, you know, who do we reach out to make sure that those get posted, and then as soon as they are, I can go in and watch that section and then finish and submit those minutes.
Okay, so
I make a motion we table.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. So we have agenda item number 2, which is election of 2021, fiscal year 2021 officers. Anybody have any motions they want to make?
Anyone want to take on secretary? It's really fun taking minutes.
Treasurer.
Anyone?
Oh,
Someone has to be the treasurer because I'm not going to be here for long, so someone else has to be treasurer now.
Anybody want to volunteer to be treasurer?
Nope.
Amy does most of the work, so it's not about Amy and Andrew.
We really need we really need a treasurer.
Well, maybe the thing to do is to,
Because in the past, you know, we had Andrew McMahon who was helping with that, and he's very busy now. So
So we'll make a motion to nominate Meg for secretary again. Do we have a second?
second.
All in favor?
Don't all rush to second it.
First and second. All right, so other officers, so treasurer, nobody's volunteering for treasurer. We'll make Izzy the treasurer. That'll teach them the
well, that's
There you
classic. You
That's
miss a meeting, you get
raw.
something.
Any,
I missed what Mimi said.
It's a classic maneuver. You miss a meeting, you get elected to something.
There
right.
you, yeah, I like that.
Well, Mike Falsetti, I see you raising your hand. Are you willing to be the treasurer?
Mr. Chairman, if Izzy's going to have starting a family, he may have, Megan, he may have his hands full. So if no one else will take it, in the interest of completion, I'll take it if no one else will do it.
I'll make a motion for Mike Falsetti to be the treasurer.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
All right. What else? Chair, anybody want to be the chair?
Re-elect Kip as our fearless leader and chair.
I second that.
Who seconded it? And who was the initial? I thought Mike was the initial.
Both Mikes. Mike
Yeah.
Falsetti initial and Mike Sullivan second.
All right. The two Mikes.
And I'll nominate Rosemary to be vice chair again.
Oh, boy.
Second.
I'll try.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye. So
Yo.
I think that's everything, correct? Is there any offices I'm missing? Amy, you've got something?
oh, actually, this is not about officers,
Okay,
but
well,
it's about the minutes. I just wanted to tell Meg that actually the video is up. I just sent it to you for June 10th.
Oh, cool.
You know,
Where was it? It wasn't on the live stream, the holyokemedia.org website.
I don't know, but Scott just sent it to me.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay, thank you.
So it sounds like we have a long lead time here, and everybody should start thinking about next year's officers, because I think we've got a 2-term limit in our bylaws.
Right.
That's for sure.
Even for secretary?
No, I think so. I think that.
Gotta
the
help you
idea
all.
That everybody would rotate, and
Right.
that would make Rosemary chair next if we went in regular order.
And I'm done as of January.
No.
Well, so we really need to start thinking about this now, because this is going to come up again real soon.
Okay.
If it does, it does. I mean, we'll deal with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, no,
It will.
Are you sure?
There'll be somebody new coming on from conservation.
Okay, good. Well, not good, but.
Yeah.
We'll,
It is good.
I'm sorry that you're
He's
good
not-
having somebody in your chair.
I'll find other things to do.
Yeah,
He's not coming on though, Rosemary. He emailed us today to say he's taken a new job.
Oh,
If you're talking about Jay Ferreira.
oh, no,
Oh,
no.
okay.
He's not. Oh, so Jay's not coming on. That's too bad, but he's not from conservation.
Oh, okay. It's somebody else.
Yeah, he was going to be elected by the city council.
So Mike Sullivan, you're
Yes.
aware, I mean, I just saw the email maybe a half hour ago that Jay Ferreira is withdrawing his name from
yeah.
consideration.
Oh, that's too bad.
The
Mhm.
mayor's spot. So I don't know if the city council has accepted any other applications or done anything to try to fill it, but
Well, to the best of my knowledge, that's the only application that was in there.
Mhm.
So I've sent out a couple of emails, trying to double check on that, but I haven't had any response.
okay,
A lot of people are on vacation. I
right.
think what we need to do is reach out to the community. I know it's advertised, but I think we all got to start shaking the tree for volunteers.
How
Right.
about,
I've been
How about
talking to one
reaching out
person,
to
but I
the-
need to check back with him.
go ahead. How about reaching out to the people who were instrumental in getting CPA in Holyoke?
Yeah, we can post it on the CPC like the Facebook page effectively for that group that worked on the legislative stuff.
Yeah,
And I think also,
and they're well-versed.
yeah, and they just might have some ideas for how to put it out there as well. But I think it's part of a wider question I
Yeah,
have around how do we air what we do and how do we get more connection.
I was just going to say, I also have that email that I send out and I could put it in there. But what would be really helpful is there a link, Mike, somewhere to a description of the job on the website?
I believe the personnel director is the one who put out the original, the information. So I think the city council needs to go to the personnel department, then advertise it, and they have the information all already there.
Right.
That they could pass on to you, Amy. The personnel director, I forgot what his name is now.
Hector.
Hector.
Right. So let's remember that, we don't want to step on the toes of the city council. This is their appointment to our committee.
That's right.
Where,
Yes.
they can advertise, they can do, I think it's really the ball in their court, not our job to help, them fill that spot. So that's just my personal opinion. I don't really
I agree.
that much, but it just does seem like it's their appointment. It's not our appointment. So Mike, maybe you can I know you have been on, and maybe you can just try again. And Elaine, I mean, I appreciate you being here while this is going on, and I know you don't want to spend the next year here. So maybe you can contact your friends on the city council and ask them.
I have already. They're not my friends anymore, I guess. I don't know what happened. Something happened.
Well, maybe they're listening to certain members on this committee that don't want you to leave, and so they're dragging their feet.
There you go.
Okay, so we're good with that, right? We're agenda item number 2, election officers, and Mike Sullivan, you'll try to communicate with the council again that we're, the one, applicant who was interested is no longer available. So maybe we can try and find somebody else. And if they want our help in finding someone, we're happy to
Well, I think I can speak for the rest of the council right now and tell you, yeah, they need some help there. I think everybody should be reaching out. We'll still, it's
Okay.
gonna have to go through personnel and all that, the general community, have a pool to pull from, but I think we've got to,
Okay.
I think we've got to find some people and throw them in the pool. You know?
Okay. So then let's, does someone want to take charge of, Amy, are you willing to do that?
Yeah, and I think that that's fine because, you know, the city council has the authority to appoint, but we can still get the word out that there is this available so that they have some sort of pool to draw from.
Okay, great. Let's do that then. All right, so let's move on to the third agenda item, which is an update on from our subcommittee on the reimbursement process, if we have any update. Mike or Rosemary, we have anything?
Yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, Amy, if you want to jump in here, basically we talked about two different models. The model that Amy had referred to when Rosemary, Amy, and I met at Rosemary's office. There were two models. I've got the, I don't know if any of you guys have it in your packet.
Yeah, if you like, I can share screen to show people that. I think I can pull that up. Would that be helpful?
Great.
I have it in front of me, so if you guys want to read it, it's basically two models. One model is referred to as the Salem Cpa Model, and the other one, oddly enough, is Mike Falsetti's CPA model. The one is based on the city of Salem's method of going about paying for people, and it's basically if you do all the work and it's done and approved, you get you get paid when it's done, complete, and it's 100%. You get paid for a $10,000 project. You get $10,000 when it's all done. My model is somewhat similar in the selection and the method of paying, but I differed a little bit in the sense that if, for example, the tenement that's being done over on Chestnut Street, I think, by Valley Opportunity Council, I think it's Chestnut Street. Say, for example, 25% of the work is done, and the contractor doing the work comes to Valley Opportunity and says, look, we've done 25%. Can you approve it? We'll give you a walkthrough and approve the 25%, and then it would give it to Amy, who would pay the contractor 25% of his labor and material. Then at the 50% increment, 75% increment. Then at the final increment, the balance, but you withhold 10% for 30 days in case there's something comes up within the 30 days that nobody had discovered that may have been missing or some missteps by the contractor. If you have 10% of the total job total in your purse, you have some leverage to get him back here to do some incidentals he may have overlooked. Basically, that's the essence of what we talked about. I wish you guys could see it and give it a little bit more.
You can bring it up.
You want me to share it, Rosemary?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Mike, are you imagining that 10% would be withheld until like the work is complete, the final report is submitted, the CPC sign is up, like that kind of piece?
Exactly. In other words, the job will be effectively done from everything, from the roof to the cellar. It's done. It's approved. It's done. We sign off, or they sign off on it, get it done. But as a matter of business, just putting 10% of the total project in your purse for 30 days. At the end of 30 days, if Valley Opportunity comes to Amy and says, we're satisfied, there's nothing, the fire chief, the electrical inspector, the plumbing inspector didn't chance upon something that gives him cause to question it and may want it redone in a certain method. We have 10% of the total. We could say, look, Mr. Contractor, the plumbing inspector is not happy with apartment 5, and you have to do that. And then when he signs off on it, we'll give you the balance of the 10%. But at least my thinking is you have 10% in your pocket, and you simply will not pay them until these punch lists, if you will, are all completed and Valley Opportunity is satisfied, and they go to Amy and say, yeah, after 30 days, everything is here where it's supposed to be. The plumbing, the electrical, the roof, everything's inspected, it works, and we're happy. and then Amy would release the balance would be the 10%. It's just as a method to hold the contractor accountable to whatever work he may be doing, and regardless of the project. And so we'll have something in our purse.
So my thought is that the contractor should be held accountable by the vendor who we are giving CPA funds to. It shouldn't be us determining that. So once the project is done and the people who are the vendors feel comfortable with that, and then we pay one bill one time for a completed project. If we're the ones controlling the project, then we're the ones doing this. So I feel like that whoever comes and grabs wants the money should be the ones in charge of overseeing the project, not us.
It's a safe, Rosemary and committee members, it's a safety measure. It's just to hold something for 30 days, which is not a long time, in abeyance. And then when valet opportunity or whatever the person is comes back and said, look, we're happy, you can release the 10%, and we'll know as a committee that it's done basically correctly, and there's not some hidden fault or some hidden condition that we don't know about. We can just throw our hands up and say, geez, I wish we didn't have to pay full price, because there's a couple of things came up once they moved in or once the machines got going or whatever the case may be, and we have no leverage over the contractor, or valet opportunity has no leverage over the contractor. It's just a safety measure, Rosemary. It's not, we're not.
I'd love to hear what other people think.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Mike. I love your point, Mike, honestly.
I'd love to think it through more with specific projects that we've already seen go through, right? Like, how would this process have affected different projects? Because I could see maybe a more detailed process like this being required for larger projects, but I wonder about smaller projects like the lanterns or the graveyard work that was done at Smith's Ferry, because it was really work done very, it was very simple work, and just, one contractor, right? Like not multiple vendors and multiple stages or steps along the way.
Meg, this would not affect the graveyard because that's a city project. These disbursements are specifically for non-city grant recipients who want the vendors paid directly, because for city projects, vendors are already paid directly. So this is basically non-city we're talking about, who can't afford to front the money.
But this still, Meg's point is broader than the one project. It is foreseeable that we could have similar small projects from a non-city vendor. On the other hand, to Mike's point, this is a safety mechanism that does make sense to me, and it is not more cumbersome than the system we have now, where there's no direct reimbursement to vendors whatsoever.
Right.
We're already overseeing, so overseeing only 10% at the end seems like a possible sort of tentative step toward, does this work? Are we ultimately comfortable maybe in not withholding these funds? But, I certainly, I see the point to, if the worst comes to worst and we have a case where somebody's got a $500 project and we're withholding $50 of it at the very end for 30 days. Maybe they can come to us if they really can't swing it and say, hey, could you release the extra 50? Here, we'll prove it to you. But I think that in bigger cases, it makes sense to keep that leverage.
I'm not sure who should keep the leverage, if it should be CPA keeping the leverage or the vendor that we're funding.
Well, but the point of having them have to fund it and then come to us surely is that we're protecting our funds.
So if for some reason a project was completed and signed off on, and everybody's approval came through and it was paid for, and then they found out later on that there was something else, it wouldn't be CPA's problem. It would be the problem of the vendor to have made sure they signed off on
You mean the vendor or the owner?
Or the owner, yeah. But either one,
The vendor, you mean the property owner?
the property owner, yes, sorry,
The grantee.
the grantee.
Is how does this protect us any differently than our current system?
Well, I don't think it does. I think our current system, we're modifying this for the sake of vendors or grantees who don't want to have to front the money because they're running on small margins.
Right,
This is purely an accommodation for them.
right.
And the question then is whether to build in an extra protection mechanism because we're going outside our usual procedure or not.
I get that.
Yeah, no,
So if the goal is just to be able to give money up front in even in, you know, maybe not 100%, but in stages, right? Over the completion of a project to a non-city vendor. I guess one of my questions is, I assumed that nobody would ever have to put money up front. And that's because, like, as a homeowner, I've never had to put money up front, really. Like, I get an invoice, it's like I have 30 days, or sometimes I get 60 days or 90 days. Like, you build it into the contract with that contractor. So I wonder about, like, if this is something that's really happening to people in a negative way, or if people really can negotiate and say, hey, my CPC funding isn't, you know, it's promised, it will appear, but it will appear after X number of days, that's when you'll be paid. Or are applicants really being pushed to front money?
So in Salem, and I think, Amy, you can maybe talk to this better than I can. If there is someone that's being funded who's non-city and doesn't have the money to put up front, then they can negotiate with the CPA to make sure that the money is there for the vendors.
I'm not sure what you mean, and it was a little hard hearing you, but we have written it out in the screen I just shared, which is just that, you know, when the recipient is unable to cover the expenses up front and wait for reimbursements, they require that the grant recipient request the pre-approval of the vendors, you know, do the paperwork and all of that before. And then once the work is completed, the request for payment may be submitted by the vendor to the recipient. So in other words, the vendor would send it to the person, like if it was, you know, Valley Opportunity, or say it was Valley Opportunity Council, their vendor would submit the invoice to VOC, who would then sign off on it and forward it to me for payment, and then I could pay their vendor directly. And so that's what Salem does. So I think, Mike, you're saying you would like them to do it in 25% increments, so they'd have to really plan ahead and know how much the total cost would be at the beginning, and then withhold the last 10%. Are you still holding to that 25% increment part of it? Or do you care more just about withholding the last 10%?
Well, I mean, either way, guys, whatever you want, but I think the 10% is, as a business method, to keep 10% in our pocket for 30 days, which is not a long time, as a safety measure to make sure the contractor or whoever's performing the work gets it done and the recipient is happy after 30 days that, yes, in fact, the horses for the merry-go-round, or anything like that is done, and we're happy with it. It works. And we're happy, so we can release the 10%. The only reason I selected 25% is to give the contractor, you know, we're saying to the contractor at 25% increments, it keeps their nose to the grindstone, if you will, that Valley Opportunity will be there to visually go through the 25% that they're claiming is done and confirm that it is done, and then release it and go to Amy and give 25% of the total. It gives Valley Opportunity a more control on the job to say, hey, look, or they could go to, I think it's Bob Parent is the engineer for the city.
Yeah.
Could you just stop in and give this a quick overview? Is this legitimate or not? Or if they may claim to do something when they actually inspect it and it's not done, they could say, no, we're not going to give you the next 25%. You didn't do the work that you said you did. So it's just a tool to keep the contractor happy by giving him his money for labor and material per percentage, 25% increment. And also vary opportunity. You could say, no, I'm not going to pay you. You didn't do what you said you did, or I'm not happy with the work. It's just a better tool to for Valley Opportunity or anybody else to have a more of a hands-on hand on the purse, if you will, immediate, because the contractor knows that if Valley Opportunity doesn't approve it, I'm not going to get my 25%, and I may have to wait longer. So it behooves me to do the job, correctly and on time and on budget, because at the next inspection by Valley Opportunity, they may not release the 25% that's due me. So it puts an added incentive on the contractor to do whatever the job is, to do it right and correctly, as is holding up on the 10%. So there are two methodologies to kind of keep the contractor in check and make sure the vendor and ultimately the taxpayers whose money we're spending gets what their value for their dollar.
So I have one question. If you're doing it in 25% increments, does that mean that Amy has to send out 4 different checks?
Yeah, I mean, we're not asking Amy to make a brick wall. Yeah, just release 4 checks.
Actually, it has to be a little different than that. If there's 10% at the end, it has to be broken up.
Well, 10, 25, 25, and 15.
So let's keep in mind, right? I think that that this came up early on with the in our first grant cycle with the Holyoke Boys and Girls Club, and I think it's those larger projects that take 6 months, 9 months, a year to complete, where the grantee is looking to not have to front these hundreds of thousands of dollars in expenses and then get the grant at the end of the project. So, it seems to me that's a problem we're trying to solve, right? To be able, so in hindsight, regardless of what actually happened, but to have a policy in place that allows disbursement of funds on some type of an agreed upon schedule. It could be, I don't know that we have to define that it's going to be 25, 25, 25, 15, 10. Someone may come in and say, I'd like to do a third, and you can hold the last third until, but what we're really trying to do is to make sure that we have the flexibility to do that, but that also the solicitor's office and procurement and treasurer, anybody else that needs to get involved in this, is signed off on the process of not, if it's, I think there may be 2 things, right? The committee's will, are we willing to establish some type of a policy that allows reimbursement, not just in waiting for 100% completion of a project like the Boys Club before any proceeds are released. And then the other part of this is, if that is the will of the committee to allow that kind of flexibility, how does that jive with the procurement and financial controls of the city? So I think that's what we're trying to accomplish, right? Like something that works for them, and also, is the committee's desire to not, and again, I think this all comes around, a lot of this discussion that we have comes around to being a user-friendly program for, good projects. We don't want a good project to not submit an application because they're worried they have to come up with $300,000 up front before they're ever going to get any CPA money. So let's see if we're, are we solving that problem? I mean, it seems that,
I have a question.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Mayor, you had something you want to say?
Well, just for clarification, I don't remember ever doing a project, even here at the house, that I had to pay up front. You wait till the project is done, and then they give you a bill and you pay it. So I would think that any of our projects that are being done, that as part of the project is finished, they submit a bill to our grantee,
Right.
and then they give it to Amy and she'll pay it. But I don't see where there's even.
Yeah, I think there's some confusion here. There was
Yeah,
nobody.
I think there is, yeah.
Yeah, nobody was ever paid without the work being done.
Right.
The work had to be done first, whether it was a city or a non-city project. And both of these models require that the project manager, say it was Valley Opportunity Council, has to sign off before I pay. So whether you withhold the 10% or do 25% increments, both of these plans are with the approval of the project manager, you know, for that project. So nobody is going to be paid directly unless, you know, say VOC approves it and sends it along to me.
Well, and nobody's getting funds dispersed up front. It's just, I forget the word.
It's just
what do you call that when it's phased payments? You know, you do 25% of the project, then you submit an invoice and get paid for that, and while you're doing the next 25%.
The big distinction between this and what we did for FY19, Elaine and everyone, is that this enables, say, like the Holyoke Boys and Girls Club, instead of them having to pay their vendor and then show me they paid their vendor, show me the vendor's invoice, they can send me, you know, the vendor's information directly. They sign off on it, and then I can pay their vendor directly.
Okay. Yes, that's that's not the way it's being done?
No.
No, so wait a minute though. So now there seems like there's two issues in my mind. One is, are we talking about paying vendors directly out of the city account? And then do we start, if that's the payment process, instead of giving 25% of the money to the Holyoke Boys Club and then let them pay the landscaper, why would we pay directly the landscaper? And do we start getting into procurement issues if we do that?
No, this is totally fine. I mean, it's completely up to us how we want to do this. And this is something,
Kip, you mean the prevailing wage law issue?
Question, but the point is that if it's a hardship for, say it was a hardship for the Holyoke Boys and Girls Club to have to pay their vendors and then get reimbursed, instead of that, they could authorize they know the work is done with their vendor, they sign off on it, they send it to me, I can pay their vendor directly. So it just makes it easier for them because they don't have to be reimbursed. I can pay them directly, but they're still in control. They're still in control. They tell me it's good to pay their vendor.
So there's two things, right? I'm going to come back to the two things. And one is, you have to do 100% of the work be completed before any CPA money comes.
No.
That's not what we're saying.
Okay. No.
It's still done in installments. Like with the Holyoke Boys and Girls Club, they didn't send me they didn't pay everything and then send me the invoice. They paid in portions, and then they sent me the invoice, and then I paid them back for each
the Boys Club.
Yeah, the Holyoke Boys and Girls Club, which is non-city. I've had about 4 or 5 different invoices from them where I paid their vendor. So it's never 100%. Has never. The only time it's been that way is like a small project, like the Annex Lanterns.
So, I mean, why do we care whether a check gets cut to the Boys Club or to a landscaping company? I mean, that's.
No, we shouldn't.
You know, I thought what we were talking about was the reimbursement process to make sure that it wasn't such a burden for someone like the Boys Club to have to disperse $350,000 before they were reimbursed. Or if Mike Falsetti with Lady Liberty, you know, does Mike or another applicant have to cut a check for $50,000 to pay their vendor?
Okay. City projects don't have to do that. City projects like Mike's project, I'll definitely be able to pay the vendor directly. Okay. But for private projects, this is something that we have been requiring them to pay their vendor, submit the paperwork to me, and then I pay the vendor. But now we're talking about an option for people who find that difficult, because even though, say, the Holyoke Boys and Girls Club submitted 4 or 5 different invoices, some of those were pretty hefty. They might have been like, you know, $50,000. So instead of them having to pay their vendor first and be reimbursed, I could pay their vendor directly if they approved it.
Yes,
All right, so
that's what we should do.
okay, so what do we want to take some action on this? I mean, what do we need to do to it, or is it necessary to take any action? You guys have done the research, you know, there's
I did the research, but thanks.
I think we should just vote on to allow Amy to pay the vendors directly when that is up on a need, when that comes up on a non-city project, pay the vendor directly, that it's okay to do that as far as we committee is
so
concerned.
partial billings, phased invoicing on larger projects with submission from the grantee to Amy with evidence that the work is done to whatever percent level, and then
it's not necessarily a percentage. Not necessarily a percentage. It's when a certain part of the project is done, like say with the basketball court and the landscaping. Okay, when the basketball court's done, okay, you pay that. When the landscaping is done, then you pay that. It's not necessarily a percentage.
I agree, because some pieces may be really different percentages as they are completed, and a specific vendor's work could be 80% or could be 5% of the bill. And I wouldn't want, again, like if we're worried about hardship, right, then I would want it to be flexible enough to meet people in their individual situations.
right.
So maybe a good
The first 25% might happen quickly, or first 15% happen quickly, but then there's going to be a long time before they reach 25%, and that way they can pay, the vendors can get paid up to that performance level. So some type of a phased reimbursement direct to vendors based on a request from the grantees. Anybody have any concerns about that? I mean, I do like the idea of a small holdback though too, Mike. I do like that idea of, you know, maybe there's a percentage of each phase, you know, what's 10%, they submit something for 25,000, there's a $2,500 holdback until the end of the project when they all get reimbursed 100% upon some sign off.
That's if it's all one vendor.
Right, exactly.
Well, it's Valley Opportunities contract.
One grantee. There's one grantee, so they don't get all their money, and you know, we don't really. I mean, if Tom Jones Masonry does work for Valley Opportunity and they don't pay him, that's not on us.
Well, if they can't reimburse, I mean, if they can't come up with the money ahead of time, then it is on us.
But so I liked the idea though, that if there was some small holdback, it would be based on if the work was 100% completed, and if the report had been submitted, and if the CPA sign was up. Like I like that piece.
Yes.
To like when that final 10% can be paid. Because I think it will also encourage applicants, if they know, again, this is the process as they're entering into it, to make sure those pieces are being completed along the way.
Right. No, I think that's a great point.
All right. So what do we do? What's our action item here? Anybody have any? Do we need to do anything? Is there?
Yes.
I think we have to have a motion.
Well, it would be good for me to know this, because this is comes up in every condition for the contract, or at least for the ones that are private. So I just need to know what you want to, you know, obviously it seems like everybody agrees that private projects should have that opportunity to have their vendors paid directly if it's a hardship. So the question is just, what do you want to require? What process?
The process that you mentioned, Amy, where the vendor would give the grantee the information, and the grantee would make sure the work is done and sign off on it and then give it to you to pay
Okay, but do you want to withhold
directly to the vendor.
Do you want to withhold the last 10% until I mean, my thing is, it seems like the project manager still has to approve everything. So
Right.
they can say, yeah, because I have no way of knowing if it's all complete. I'm still trusting whoever's managing the project when they say, yes, the project is complete. So I don't know how the 10% will, but it's up to you guys. So.
I don't care about the 10% one way or the other. It's
Mike Falsetti.
I do. I like keeping 10% in my wallet, and sometimes contractors cut corners. Sometimes things they say they do, they don't do. And it's only after a good 30 days when the Valley Opportunity, whoever the person is, goes through the project, whatever it may be, and they discover things that they thought were there aren't, or things that were supposed to be done aren't done. Usually within 30 days, you know the project's working, you're happy with it. But if you have no leverage on the contractor, he's not going to come back. Why would he?
But the only thing with that, Mike, is that we're not going to give them more funds if they discover, oh, we need more money. Like, we have committed a specific amount.
That's a different
precisely
issue.
that. It's precisely that. It's by holding on to 10%. It's a leverage to make sure the contractor, if there are any punch lists or items on the punch list that aren't discovered until 2 or 3 weeks into the building, then they are discovered. At least we got 10%. Like I said, at the end of 30 days, you release the 10% and say, everybody's fine. You're happy, we're happy. It's just a business model to make sure you protect the money that you're paying for. Again, we're talking about the citizens' money. That's whose money we're guarding, that we're entrusted to make sure that things are done right and proper. This is just it's done all the time in business, all the time in contracts and engineering. You always withhold 10% for 30 days, just to make sure that everything is up to snuff at the end of 30 days. If you don't, the contractor walks away and you got no leverage over him. You still have money in the budget for the full amount. You're holding 10% for 30 days. And at the end of 30 days, if everybody's happy, then you release it.
Right, but isn't that up to, like, Rosemary, weren't you thinking that's what the project manager is responsible for?
He may not discover it. My point I'm telling you is he may not discover it. But you know, it's
not our job.
Well, it is our job. It is our job to protect the taxpayers' money. Yes, it is our job. It's the
up to
taxpayers'
them
money.
to sign off on a completed project. And if the project is completed and we pay the money, it's their problem. We don't have to give up any more money.
Well, no, but our interest is still at stake here. We are giving this money in order to have a properly completed project, you know, as described. And I think that Mike's point is that this is one more way to protect our interest in having it done. It is not the case that the interest is entirely our grantees. Otherwise, we wouldn't be giving them the money at all. It's because the city and the public have an interest that we're even making the grant. And that 10% there is just one extra bit of insurance that it's been done right. It's to protect our interest, not to protect the grantee's interest.
Well, I'd like to think that the grantee is signing off on a completed project that is complete. And if they're not,
well,
I know.
We also have the MOUs, or we have the preservation restrictions that we've been talking about at length. You know, I also think about that as protection for us.
Yeah, it's just a matter of how risk averse you are. And, you know, I'm a lawyer. I'm extremely risk averse. It goes with the territory.
It's good to hear all this.
all right. So where are we coming down? I mean, so someone wants to make a motion to allow direct payment of vendors on a phased approach with or without 10% as holdback as part of that motion. Does anybody want to make a motion like that? Mike?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make that motion, but I would like to include the 10% to make sure the taxpayers' money goes where it's supposed to be. There's no way that Valley Opportunity Council is going to know that that tenement is done perfectly and exactly as they said it would be until they go through it and live it and discover it. There's no way they're going to know that. They're going to have a they'd have to have a project engineer every single day on site to make sure they get it all done right. Nobody's going to do that. They don't have the money for it.
Okay, so,
Okay, so I will second that motion because.
okay, we have a
I think this
motion and a second that includes the holdback of 10% until for at least 30 days.
30 days.
Okay,
So I'd like to say something if you don't mind, because there's a similar situation in the construction business where, you know, you get paid at certain increments, percent complete of projects, but with each payment that goes to the general contractor, you hold back a retainage. And that's usually 5%. You know, you can change that number as you like, but retainage gets held until the very end of the project. And so does that fit with what we're saying? I guess.
I think that's what the Holyoke Boys and Girls and Club, the Holyoke Boys and Girls Club was already doing on their own behalf.
Yeah, because that's pretty standard. And what that
So
does
I
is
feel like they're doing it anyway with their own vendors. Yeah.
it allows you to accrue that retainage until the end of the project. And then usually 5% of the total cost of the project is enough to fix anything that's wrong with the project. So, and you only hand that over at the very end when everybody's signed off and the project's 100% complete and, you know, they've been using it for 30 days, that kind of thing.
So
I think I'm very comfortable voting to allow, you know, the CPC manager to be able to pay vendors directly in stages at the completion of work. But I would be interested to hear from some of our applicants around if that process that we're talking about with the holdback is parallel to something they're already doing. Is it redundant, or would they see value in it?
What difference does it make? It's our money. We're granting them the money. It's
just information, Michael. Just wanting to understand it better because I don't come from business. I come from education.
If you come from business and construction, this is standard operating procedure. This is very standard. You never pay full for the project. You never pay full. You wait for a period of time until you're happy with it. Then when I use 30 days, because that's a very common amount of time, then you know that everything's all set. Unless you have a project manager on the site every day, and most people, quite frankly, I'd be hard pressed to think they would, you have no way of knowing if how what you're spending your money on is actually being done.
So we had a motion and a second, I think, on the 10%. Do we want to vote on that, or do we want to amend that motion to incorporate Marco's suggestion of holding back 5% of each reimbursement until the end? What do you guys want? Do you want to take a vote on the existing motion?
Well, we need to find out if they were already doing that themselves, you know.
Right, that's Megan's point.
I mean, I think it's probably good business for them to be doing it, but I think our money is also different. Like we're saying we're going to hold back some percent until we're comfortable. Mike Sullivan, you had your hand up.
Yeah, through the chair, Elaine, even some of them might be doing it on their own, but we don't know. There's other ones that come along that aren't doing it on their own. What Mike Falsetti's presenting is a way to ensure that it's happening. Okay, that's all it really is, because we don't know the next person in line, the next person in line, the next person in line. Forget Valley Opportunity Center. Having a 30-day holdback, it is common. It is very common. And think about all the other things. What if the stained glass windows started dropping off 2 weeks after they were installed? What if the horse fell off the merry-go-round? You know, and they were paid for it.
Okay, so
I think the 30 days is a great idea. It's very common, you know. All
right, so we have a and that's the 10%. We have a motion and a second to allow direct payment of vendors in a phased approach with a holdback of 10% of the total project amount until 30 days after the grantee has noticed of their final request for vendors to be paid.
I just know that for us, sometimes we're dealing with applicants for whom we are the sole source of funding. So of course, then we, in those cases, might want to play a really active role. But I also think about other projects where we are 10% of their total funding and they're dealing with lots of different funding sources. I just want to make sure that we're not creating something that creates additional burden, or that is another hoop for them to jump through as they're trying to manage a lot of different policies from different sources of funding.
And are we ready to, I'm going to call for a vote unless anybody has anything they feel passionately about saying. Mike Sullivan, you have something passionate to say?
Yeah, just through the chair again, to Meg on that one. It's not a problem for the recipient of the grant. It's something that the contractor has to deal with, and most contractors are used to dealing with that. When you bid the project, you know what it is when you bid it, and those are the terms, and that's when you're going to get paid.
Okay.
All right, all in favor?
Amy has something.
I just had a question because I just don't completely understand. So if the, say it's Valley Opportunity Council, if they say, yes, this project is complete, after the 30 days, I can then release the last 10%? Is that what you guys are voting on?
Well, yes, pardon me, Mr. Chairman, yes, whoever the project is, whether it's Valley Opportunity Council or the horses for the merry-go-round, at the end of 30 days, if they send you a note and say everything is good and fine, the horses didn't fall off, the paint didn't fall off, or we're fine with it, release the 10%, it's done.
Okay, so I would just, as a matter of course, withhold the last 10% of their invoice for 30 days until they, and then they would say at the end of the 30 days, everything's good, and I release it. Okay, I just want to
need some final documentation affirming that everything is up to spec. And,
can anyone speak before we vote to this idea that maybe these smaller projects would not fall underneath the same process? Or would we really, I mean, the lanterns was $500, that's $50. So like, that's not an incentive financially at that point. And it just becomes an additional, like Amy then has to, put a check out for $50. I mean, I'm just wondering if there's a threshold where we're saying if it's above this amount, this gets triggered, that there's a 10% holdback. But if it's a really simple project, we're just not going to pay you anything until it's the end because it's under $1,000.
Well, they may not submit an invoice until the end also. I mean, that's part of, remember, I think the primary thing.
What, we're going to hold, and then we're going to hold up 10%? Hello?
No, I'm thinking, and maybe I am being unreasonably optimistic here, with something like the lanterns, we do not exactly run with the degrees of bureaucracy of, say, the Social Security Administration. We are a small committee in a small city. If you come into us with a small project and say, hey, look, my engineer who oversaw the reconstruction of this lantern says it's fine, can we please just disperse with this? I would think we could take a vote and say, yes, we will waive the 10% holdback in this case.
Sure. Yep. No problem.
But what I'm thinking,
or even in contract negotiations, we could agree to that as the term.
Based on at least my time on the planning board, there is always something that is discovered after a project is more or less done, and it's good to have some way of guaranteeing that it gets fixed, because otherwise, I promise you, 6 months, a year, 2 years later, you'll still be saying, hey, whatever happened with that thing that was supposed to get done? Has XYZ ever done it? And the answer will be no, they haven't, because there was no incentive and no oversight.
Right, exactly.
Well, I like your point that it can be specified for specific. I mean, I don't know, does that need to be amended in the motion? Or if that's just like a practice that our committee can adopt. But I like the idea that there can be some flexibility with really small projects that could be waived.
Right, and remember, these are non-city projects, and these are projects that are requesting us to pay the vendor directly.
Right. Yeah, but if it is prudent for us to amend the motion, I would amend it to say, this is our general practice, and the committee may, for small projects, elect to waive this requirement on request of the applicant.
I'll second that. So do we got to amend the
If that's
motion?
acceptable to
How do we-
Mike, because we're doing this on the fly and it was his motion.
Mr. Chairman, I thought we voted on this already, didn't we?
Well, we started,
No.
yeah, I thought we were.
No,
too.
we voted. Mr. Chairman, we voted.
No,
Well,
we did not.
Yes,
half
we
of
did.
us
We
voted.
all held up our
No,
hands.
we did not vote on
I-
it yet.
Mike, half of us voted. I'm with you. I felt like I voted, but then other people started,
I mean, I
asking
thought I
if we could
voted.
still
but-
talk about. So let's just get it right. Where are we on this thing? I
Okay.
mean,
So
we
what
we
you're
had a
gonna,
first, we
you're
had
gonna-
we had a motion that was seconded. We had a lot of discussion. We were just having a discussion about whether we were going to amend that original motion or not. Mimi, I think you made that motion to amend.
Well, I semi-made it and then I
Yes.
deferred to the maker of the original motion because I didn't want to just override, Mike has put a lot of thought into
Right,
this.
okay.
I am just coming
All
in
right.
late and listening to this
Okay,
discussion.
so,
And I didn't want to amend his motion in a way he disapproved of.
okay,
well,
so,
I second the amendment that Mimi made, and if that passes, original and the amendment passes.
but Mimi's saying she didn't make a motion.
So if I can make a quick check-in with Mr. Falsetti, was
Sure.
my amendment consistent with the spirit of what you wanted to do, such that you would be okay with it?
So we would pay the vendors directly. We withhold 10% for 30 days after their job is finished and complete. And the people we give the money to say, we're all set after 30 days, release the 10%, and the project is done. You want to add an amendment to it by saying if it's under $1,000, this need not apply. Is that correct?
Well, what I want to say is, if it's, under 1,000 is fine. If it is, the vendor or the grantee may apply to us for relief from this provision, which we may grant at our discretion.
That's fine.
Mhm.
That's
No,
fine.
don't add a dollar amount. Don't put a dollar.
Okay, so
Fine.
Nick, you'll be able to figure that out when you review what the exact. So we have a motion to amend, and we have a second to amend that. If not, I'll
Second.
second the motion to amend to the language that Mimi just said. So all in favor of the amended language in the motion? All in favor? All right, pass.
So that's
So one against,
4, 5,
With
6,
one
7, so
abstention.
7 out of
Okay.
8.
one against.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was that a vote to amend, or
That
was
was a
that
vote to
a
accept
vote
the
on the amended
amended
motion?
motion, I believe.
It,
Okay,
it,
so
it
now-
takes care of both.
It does? Okay, good. Next.
So that
So
was easy.
agenda item number 4 is the development of a small grant application. Have we made any progress on that? No.
No, I had the end of my school year, which was
Yeah, great.
insane. And this was my first week of not having that craziness. So
Okay.
Mike and I have a date for next week to
Okay,
start brainstorming it.
so we'll make a motion to table that.
So
Second.
moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so table that. Agenda item number 5 is the preservation restriction for MIFA. I've got a quick update there. They're in agreement that they need to enter into a preservation restriction. They want to add an addendum to the restriction, which clarifies that during the construction period, which will be heavily overseen by U.S. Parks and Mass Historical, that either a Holyoke Historic Commission and our preservation restriction would not be enacted or active until after construction was completed, or language that says that if there's a conflict between the Holyoke Historic Commission and U.S. Parks and Mass Historic, that those state and federal agencies would supersede the opinion of the Holyoke Historic Commission. So they're working on some language just to try to avoid a conflict during construction. They don't have the exact language that proposed yet, but they are, you know, they are in agreement that, you know, that they will enter into a preservation restriction. They just want some, you know, it's a little unusual. It's such a big project, and there's these other agencies that are involved in, you know, reviewing the design and construction changes, that if something comes up, they don't want to get bogged down in the middle of construction by a conflict between the local historic commission and US Parks. So that's kind of the update there. I don't have the language. They haven't submitted it yet in a final form. So, you know, that's the update there. Mike, you have something you wanted to add to that?
Mr. Chairman, are you suggesting that for item 5 and 6, we just table both items?
I'm a table item number 5. Certainly, I'm a little, and I was seeking some clarity about what addendum number 1 is. That their proposed addendum to the preservation restriction, Amy?
I think that you put that on there. I think that is what you're talking about.
Okay, so let's, yeah, I would take a motion to table 5 and 6.
I make a motion, we table 5 and 6.
Second.
But
All in favor?
well, can I just mention what the city solicitor officer or office said about that, or do you not want to discuss that?
Let's just table. We'll come back to it. We don't have what they're proposing yet. All right, all in favor of tabling? Okay.
Who seconded that motion?
I did.
I did. Huda. Okay, thank you.
So we have agenda item number 7, which is a review of the proposed conditions for the 2020 project recipients. Amy, you put together some documents for us. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to review the proposed conditions, if anybody has any comments on them in general, if we want to go through them project by project. I mean, I didn't have any comments on any of them at this point. I thought they were, you know, they were fine. I don't know if anybody wants to.
So if you want, I can give you an update on Glowtech.
Well,
These are the new
20, these are the proposed, we're like contract negotiations, like contract structure for 20. Well, I would be interested in that. We'll come to that. But, you know, if has everybody had a chance to even look at the list of conditions? Do we want to buy some more time and maybe table this too and come back to it at our next meeting? Anybody have any comments on it, or what's the will of the committee in dealing with this? Go ahead, Mike.
Well, Mr. Chairman, through you to Amy, all the items in red, are these by your calendar or by your progress report? Are these, in your opinion, are the items in red those things per grantee? Do these have to be decided this evening, for example?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Mike, is that I have some questions in there that really, you know, just like last year, the committee has to, you know, I don't know what the will of the committee is. And, you know, it's really up to you to determine the conditions that go in the contracts. So I put, you know, what I think that based on the application, you know, what they proposed for their project in here, but there are some questions. And you did resolve the disbursement one for non-city projects, so that's already done. So there really isn't that much. It probably wouldn't take you that long, you know, just to, you know, make sure that you sign off on this, because I'm just kind of guessing what I think you want.
Okay.
I noticed, Amy, that in the, sorry, Kip.
No, go ahead, Nick.
Oh, I was just noticing that the stained glass one that you sent, I noticed that what we voted on around the 10% holdback, I think that aligned with the question you had in red for the stained glass project around like the 30-day holdback that you had.
The stained glass is a city project, Meg, so the vendors are paid directly, so
it's irrelevant in that case.
It's irrelevant. It's only for the private projects, which are Armour and Company, Holyoke Housing Authority, not, you know, is a non-city project for the housing, and the Holyoke merry-go-round.
Okay.
I liked the idea that you had that the final report with before and after photographs and a description of the work would be completed 30 days after.
All right, so look, let's go, Amy, let's go through your, you know, you sent us an email with a table attached. Why don't you take over? I mean, it started, the first attachment was stained glass. You want to just go through each of them quickly and ask us for some help or clarification about?
Would you like me to share screen so you can all see the same document?
Yes.
Okay. I just have to see if I can pull that up. Hold on one moment. I'm going to look for it. It'll just take me a minute because what I had up is no longer up. So okay. So I'm going to share screen. Share. Okay, so we'll start with the stained glass one, which I'm opening now. I hope this works okay. This might be too slow. Or if you don't want to do this, share screen. I just think it's good for people to.
Well, I think at least one of these projects we do need to talk about, so.
This is taking a long time to open, unfortunately. Oh, here it goes. Okay.
Is this your new computer?
No, this is a very old computer. This is my personal computer because I don't have the new computer yet.
How come?
Oh,
It takes time. I don't know. It's a rec order was done for it. They also have to set it up for me, you know.
that's so sad. I thought for sure you'd have it by now.
Me too.
No.
Further proof that you needed it.
Right.
Just show his fist.
Amy,
Yeah.
Amy, you should have done this like 2 months ago. That's because you did a request for a computer and you would have gotten it.
Well, no, she did. She's been trying for months.
I'm just saying it's just painfully clear, you know, watching how slow it's.
Yeah.
it's-
Well, this could be more a matter of the internet speed here in East
Well,
Hampton.
you know, we should all have this because Amy emailed us these charts.
Yeah, I did email everybody this, so you could also pull it up on your own
I pulled
computer.
it up on my computer, but
Yeah.
What's going to happen? It looks like we're close on the screen sharing.
Well, I thought I had clicked on something and it just
Didn't load.
maybe, you know, it could be that I don't have as much bandwidth because I'm on Zoom and I'm
Yeah.
trying to do something on
Yeah.
the internet. That's my guess. So if you can pull it up on your own computer,
Yeah, we can.
that would be better.
All right, so you're going to stop the screen sharing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Mike Falsetti, I saw your hand going up. What do you have?
Mr. Chairman, the only thing that the only thing in red that is of any consequence is the reports. It says final report with or before or after photos, a brief description of the work completed 30 days after completion, July 31st, 2021 at the latest. I mean, there's not. Amy, do you have anything else to like to add to that?
Well, there are a few other things like the Wisteria Hearst project.
Oh, just this one, just the stained glass.
Oh, the stained glass one. Yeah, I think that's really the only thing. And also there is a change to the project description because they didn't get quite as much money from Mass Historic Commission as they asked for. They got, so there's a, you know, it's, if you read through column 1, you'll see that they got 50,000 instead of 80,000, and to restore and install a whole gigantic window can cost $70,000. So it's just important that people know that it might just be one window plus the removal and crating. I just want people to know, you know, you are the committee. You need to know what you want, you know, what these projects are, so there's no surprises later.
I like your question to them around like, how will you scale it back? Just what is their actual plan to scale it back? based on that reality.
And actually I did get the answer, so you can cross that line out, because if you look at the first column, that is the answer from Bob Parent about how they're going to scale it back.
Mhm. So we're set with that. And that seems like a very reasonable plan.
Okay, so Amy, what are?
Okay, so for this one, do you want, like Mike was saying, a final report with before and after photos? I think this is what was required for the first phase, which he's going to have to submit soon, or the last award. So shall we keep that the same?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, that was fine. Yep.
Okay, so then we can move on to Wisteria Hearst if you want to keep going through this.
Yes, please.
Um,
Well, okay, so we're doing Wisteria Hearst?
I think
Okay.
our email has this in a different order.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay.
I don't
well,
have-
we can do it in a different order if you want. I just thought we would go through the easy city ones first, but
I'm happy to do it. It just, the confusion is because we're seeing different things. In
okay,
different-
what do you want to do next?
Wisteria Hearst.
Yes.
Oh, that's the one I just mentioned. Okay.
Right.
So they let's see. The only, see under the third column, you could ask for the, oh no, that doesn't matter. I think that was a note to myself to see if, because sometimes the contract process gets delayed, so it might be good to know the number of months that they will need to complete the project in case it can't be completed by that date. But I think she said that it would be.
Okay.
So I don't know, I'm just asking, do you want any other deadlines within it, or are you fine with this?
I think that probably we're good with this. And I know they took advantage of the great shutdown to accelerate work.
Yep.
So they're probably ahead of what would have been there.
Okay.
They are.
Voted on.
Yeah.
And so then do you also want the final report with before and after photos? It would be kind of weird, before and after photos of electrical wiring, but they
Yeah.
did send
Oh, it's
the old
nice to
photos.
have it as documentation.
Okay. And a report, so the same requirement within 30, due 30 days after the deadline.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, as is possible, because I know they've already started the work and they might not have, I don't know. I guess they had the initial photographs from the report that they used for the presentation for us.
Oh yeah, she's super
That was very
organized.
dramatic.
Yeah.
Okay, so that one's all good. And then Lady Liberty Project. If you look in the first column, I'm asking, what should the study include? I mean, maybe that's something we're leaving up to Mike to work with Bob Parent on the bidding process, or do you want to say whether it should, what it should include?
What is your pleasure?
You know, like, should it include guidelines on the steps needed to repair the monument? That's my understanding of,
Isn't that the purpose, Mike?
That is the purpose, essentially to evaluate the current condition of the statue and write out a process to restore it to its original glory, in a nutshell, according to the Department of the Interior's requirements as a federal statue on federal park.
Sounded like you said that it would include the restoration, but you mean a plan for how to restore it, right?
Correct, yes.
In the report, would we, like, I've seen conservation reports where they include a lot of historical context to when it, kind of going back and doing the research on it itself in terms of its meaning, its significance, when it was built, why it was built, by whom, the architect, I've seen conservation reports that have a lot of context and history, which can be really important in terms of understanding the significance of something that is a city property. So I wonder about that piece, if that belongs in this kind of report or not.
Meg, all that information is current. We know all about that.
Okay.
This is courtesy of the very excellent librarian we have. The woman has a PhD, believe it or not. She is masterful and getting information on who built it and why and so on and so forth. Meg, we've got all that now as we speak.
I'm just wondering if it would make sense to have it be in this final report or not. And just like in terms of like, it's a summation of all the work done on this statute.
Well, certainly I could tell if I can instruct in our requirements, I could ask him, and he or she will be putting in a brief history on when was the statute complete, the conditions, who was the designer.
Yep.
I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, of all things, it was a Confederate general who designed it. Talk about the height of irony. But anyway, I think, if I'm not correct, I'm going on memory, so I could be incorrect, but I thought I read something like that. It was something rather unusual. But all that information is present as we speak. And the preservationist would include in his opening, he or she opening paragraphs, a brief history of the statute, how it got to be there and why, and its current conditions, and then the narrative will go forth from there.
Okay.
Well, I see a note in red saying that the bid might have already gone out.
Yeah, actually, it wasn't, but that is what.
But I would think
I forgot her name. The head of purchasing told me that, and I was like, "What do you mean it went out?" She said, "Oh no, it didn't go out." So
okay,
I don't know.
But I would think that all of this information is likely to be in the request for proposals. You know what they're going to be asking for.
Right.
So
You got it. Yeah.
Do you want to see the RFP, or is that part of? No.
well, if we're happy with the RFP, I think what I'm suggesting is maybe we could just crib the guidelines from there, because somebody's already thought about what the study should include, since that'll be in the RFP, right?
So you want to be able to see the RFP first.
Well, no. So I'm suggesting that if we want to include under project name, scope of work, conditions about what the study should include, someone has already done that work, and we can just get the conditions or the scope of work from the RFP that already exists.
Right. Yeah.
So Mike, is there an RFP that has been developed?
No, not yet. We're in the process of doing it.
Okay.
Okay.
But you know, it's going to talk about this statue, where it came from, how old it is, who designed it, what, and then it'll be the current conditions, and it'll be a plan to restore the statue to its original conditions.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Okay. So that's what it should include.
Right.
That's what it's going to include.
All right. So do we have any other changes or suggestions for the conditions? Amy, do you have any other questions on?
Okay, so the second column, most people, in your application, Mike, in your budget, you didn't put a line for the cost of the permanent signage. And in the application, I had in there that the recipient is responsible for paying for covering the cost of the permanent signage, which I would have to see and approve of. So you didn't have that in your budget, but I just wanted to mention it, that the other recipients have that in their budget. So,
Well, number one, I'm sure we can come up with money to put a permanent sign. Number two, we have to be careful. If the Department of the Interior does not allow those type of signs, the sign doesn't go up. It's as simple as that. I'm just saying that could be a possibility. If this is a federal property now.
Well, they're not doing the project. This is just a request for a proposal. So there's nothing to hang a sign on, really, at this point in time anyway.
Yeah, do you want to, in this case then, do you want to waive that requirement for, and
Yes.
would you have just temporary signage while the study's going on? But maybe that doesn't even make sense. I don't know.
No,
if you want to put,
doesn't make
if you want to, it's a statue. I mean, let's not, this is not, it's a statue. Let's keep the original essence of the statue there and not put a sign brought to you by your friends at Nestle Quick. No, it's a statue.
I might feel differently if at this phase we were funding a restoration of the statue versus a
Yes,
study
yes.
to restore it. I don't know, I'm gonna put a sign up that says CPA is funding a restoration study of this beautiful statue. I don't know. Anybody feel strongly about putting a sign there?
Michael, you've got
No.
some strong opinions. I think you should start thinking about what would be a good sign to you. Like, and what the placement would look like and the font, and like, make it nice, like make it something you could live with and feel happy about. Like, you've got lots of time.
I thought he's saying though he doesn't want any signage. That doesn't make sense.
But I'm saying that there needs to be a sign, so you have time to think about what I mean, look at Martha's Vineyard. Like, their Dunkin' Donut signs look real different, right? So I feel like,
Well, and
come up with a sign that feels good. It can have wrought iron on it. It can
and
Have a little,
be
just a
fancy.
little bronze plaque.
It could be a
attached
bronze
to it.
plaque. Like, it could be
Yeah.
very tasteful.
and that would be and that would be part of the restoration of the statue if CPA money is funding it.
Not doing that.
We're not doing that. That's what I'm saying.
Right, exactly. We don't need a sign. No,
Guys, we don't need a sign. This is a statue.
I don't think we need a
It's a
sign.
statue. We don't need a sign.
I
good
think you
grief,
need a
like I
sign
said,
for the
a
work.
temporary sign, a temporary
No.
sign, but that's it. When it's done, it's done. Leave the statue with a glory of its own.
I think in the end, well, is the goal that somehow when it's conserved, that the taxpayers would not know that their money
Oh.
went towards the work that occurred to make it happen?
Of course they're gonna know. This is a
How?
small city.
Yeah, how
Without a sign, they will not know, Michael, and that's why we require signs.
The quality and the
We don't
grandeur of
need
the
a giant sign, though. All we probably need is what people put on many monuments, which is a little inconspicuous bronze plaque or something on it saying this was
My
funded by.
It can be
please,
next to
help.
it. It doesn't need to be like pasted on the forehead. It can be like really tastefully right at the foot of it by flower.
Okay, guys, let me find out if the feds will allow it.
Yeah, no, that
If they allow
obviously,
it and they say it's okay, then we'll put a sign there that says a picture of me with my name saying hello and thank you. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay, so are we saying that there will be no temporary signage? Say if people are coming to look at the statue as they study it, we're not going to put anything up at all?
I
Guys,
think there should be a temporary sign.
if you guys want a temporary sign, we'll put one up.
No, I have temporary signs already. That part is pretty easy. You would just have to figure out how to make it stand up.
We can do that. We can do that, certainly. Yes,
You,
answer
Mike.
your question, yes.
Okay, so you'll let us know about, I didn't know this park was federal, so you're going to let us know about permanent signage, Mike?
If they'll allow it. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know what the requirements are of a federal property with a federal statue. They may not allow it, or they may have specific requirements of what what the plaque will be and what will be on the plaque. I don't know that. I just don't know.
All
well,
right.
that's fine. So we'll find out and then we'll deal with it.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right. Anything else on Lady Liberty under the conditions? Amy, have any other questions, or anybody in the committee have any?
So as you can see, 180 days from the time of the award, and I'm interpreting that as the time that the contract is signed, that's when it would be completed. Also, what about, is a report necessary? Because it in itself is like a report, so it doesn't
It is the
make
report.
sense.
That is the report. We'll accept that as the report.
Okay,
That's the report.
Mhm.
okay.
Anything else?
All right, so that one's done. Next, we're going to Holyoke merry-go-round
Okay.
for 26,170.
I have to leave the meeting, Kip.
Okay, Mayor.
I'll see you guys later. Have a
Okay,
good
thank
night.
you.
Elaine,
Me too.
We
Yeah.
still have a quorum, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Elaine, are you coming back, or is this the end for you?
Well, oh, I'm just
Well, I
leaving
think
for
she's gonna
tonight.
be here at the next meeting.
Yeah, I'll see you at the next meeting.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great.
All right, so what were we moving to? Which project next?
Merry-go-round.
The Holyoke merry-go-round project, which is private, non-city. And one of the big things with this is that the preservation restriction, which I think is on our agenda, of 25 years, the committee already voted last year to require the preservation restriction of 25 years in exchange for the public interest. And so I'm trying to educate all the private recipients on what the PR is, because we've run into some roadblocks, as you know, with the other ones. So,
as I recall, the merry-go-round people were perfectly content.
what's that, Meg? I mean, Mimi?
I recall the merry-go-round people having no problem with it.
Well, they just aren't familiar with a preservation restriction, and they're learning about it now. See, this is what we've learned, and a point that Crystal and Jenna made is that we have to really make sure they know what a preservation restriction requires. So I've emailed them samples of it to understand it. Because, you know, you all voted that it lasts for 25 years, and it is, you know, it is pretty strict. So, but it's important.
And would it fall on the entire property versus just on these 4 horses? Because I know
it's the entire property, and usually the exterior, but in this case it would be the interior, because the point of it is, as Jenna Wellhoff pointed out, if you're if the CPA is giving public funds to the steeple of a building, right, and then the building collapses, the steeple is worthless. So that's the easiest way to illustrate why it's important. Like the Holyoke merry-go-round is a significant historic resource, not for just 4 horses, but for the entire merry-go-round. So that's why it isn't just, you can't piecemeal it and say just the sconces for MIFA, for example, just the horses. It's the resource that was determined to be historic there. That's the reason why you've awarded the funds, because they meet what's allowable for CPA historic resources.
Will it put any additional burden on them in terms of the scope of work that they may need to do to the interior of that building over time? Like, does it put other aspects of the building, suddenly it's more expensive to do work on it, or there's more restrictions because now they have to fall underneath the Department of the Interior's guidelines for everything versus just the horses?
You know, I don't, you know, I think that they need to evaluate that, and I could send you a sample preservation restriction if you want to see it. But it is very, you know, Crystal made it clear that, you know, because of the anti-aid amendment, this is like a protection for, you know, the reason for the funds is the public, you know, interest. So
yeah, I'm just, as we're trying to understand the difference in the effect of a PR versus an MOU with a number of applicants now, I'm asking questions and trying to better understand the impact of something before we put it on paper and say we've approved the contract conditions.
Well, I think
this was already voted on, but yeah, we can talk about that.
Yeah, and I think it's very valuable to make sure that they understand what they're getting themselves in for before they determine whether to accept the award. From what I can see of what Crystal is telling us, you know, we don't have a lot of flexibility in terms of the MOU versus the preservation restriction. We really need the preservation restriction in order to be able to legally allocate these funds. But, you know, certainly the applicant needs to be able to determine whether it's worthwhile to them or not.
Well, that's all of that is true. And then when you think about the merry-go-round, right, is like the building a historic resource, or is it the carousel? So why are we putting restrictions on the building and the interior, the exterior of the building, when it's really just a carousel that's the historic resource? The building's new.
That's a good point, and I think that the PR has.
That was my piece around the PR. Like, I don't want to see it be extended to the building because the building is not historic, and so I don't want to mess them up where suddenly they're just trying to do a renovation to the bathroom, and it's suddenly like this thing where they're falling under the Department of the Interior guidelines.
If the building is not historic, it won't cover the building.
Yeah, no, the carousel is the object here. And
the
carousel that has to be covered.
So as long as it's clear that the PR is restricted only to the carousel, then I feel confident that like they are totally okay with that, right? Because they're doing everything underneath the guidelines of the Department of the Interior anyway. And so I don't think it would be an undue burden, but it also protects our investment.
Yeah, but I think they still need to understand what it means. And, But
Right.
I agree, absolutely. The historic resource is the carousel. It has its own integrity, but the resource is not the horses, it's the carousel.
Exactly. Yeah, so the only thing I had in here, which I've actually resolved this, so you'll be glad that the meeting will be probably shorter. I wasn't sure who would cover the cost of the PR because we think it costs about $105 to record it. But the way that Jenna wrote the preservation restriction for the FY19 applicants was that the property owner would cover it because that was what you decided as a committee. Because remember how we were worried about admin funds, and so the committee decided they could budget for that. So it could still come out of CPA funds, but they would have to budget for it. And this was in the application. So rather than coming out of admin funds, the 5% admin, they would be covering it. So that is legitimate to do it that way, is what I learned from the solicitor's office.
All right. So do we have anything else on this, the merry-go-round conditions chart? Any other comments? The reports look good.
One report is fine. I don't think we need an interim report, Amy.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Okay, one report is fine, and we already talked about the disbursement process, that they have that option. And no deadline for any portion of the work, so that's fine, right? You don't want any deadline.
It's all going to be done. And yes. I mean, it's going to be done. There is a general deadline, right? We don't have phase deadline, but it should be complete in 6 to 8 months. So right. A maximum of April 30th, 2021.
It says October 2021.
I don't know. Sorry.
I'm wrong. I'm looking at the wrong project.
They said 6 to 8 months. They didn't. I just put an example that if it started in September, the maximum date would be that date.
All right. So well, let's put like June 30th, 2021. I mean, some date so that the money gets spent.
Well, I would just suggest that in cases like this, we might want to add a provision that we can extend it for good cause, because the same virus shutdown that's affecting so many things is causing all kinds of delays.
I 100% agree with that.
I mean, I think a deadline
reasonable extensions. Yeah. I mean, we can do that. We can amend an agreement and a reasonable extension, whether that language is there or not. But it does. I think it's wise to put that language in there.
Would we do that for all of them?
Yeah.
This cycle?
I think so.
Because you haven't said that for the other ones, a maximum date, a deadline. Like
this one, it jumped out at me because this will be specialized work that they can't have done by just anybody.
Right, of course.
Yeah. Right.
Mr. Chairman, it's an interesting point. Do we want to have this applied just to the merry-go-round to allot them a reasonable amount extension of time due to the conditions we're in, or do you want to make that apply to all the grantees who received our money? I mean, would you like to do both, or one in particular, or what is your feeling?
I mean, I would like to see, a reasonable deadline in each of the agreements, and I think it would be wise to add language in there that says, reasonable requests for extensions will, at the discretion of the committee, should be just boilerplate language. But I do think, Amy, you can probably go through each of these agreements and come up with a reasonable deadline that the recipients, proposing it to them, if it's pick any project, Lady Liberty, you have until, whatever Mike wants. So how much time do you need to do that? Next June, and then if it needs to get extended, it can. But I don't like the idea of money being granted and then it's just kind of sitting there for the next 3 or 5 years, and you decide, when things come. I don't know, and I'm only saying Lady Liberty because it's straightforward and it's not a lengthy project. It's easy to use as an example, but I do think we should include language in each of the agreements that has project to be completed by, but deadline can be extended requested by the grantee to the committee.
Right, and at the will of the committee, because we could
Right.
say yes and we can say no.
Right.
Yes.
Depending on the particulars, it might really not, we can tell it's not really about the
Right.
issue of the
Right.
delay because of coronavirus versus some other delay.
For the merry-go-round, it's 6 to 8 months, and I put from the time of the signed contract, so I can just figure out, you know, from that time of the signed contract, what that would be, and put in that as the deadline, or you can give a buffer of, you know, a month or whatever.
Yeah. Do that. And then, you know, and then with language that says it can be extended beyond the deadline by the request and approval of the committee. Mike Falsetti, what do you have?
Kip, do you want to make that into a motion, as Megan suggested, I think very accurately, to make a reasonable time upon the discretion of the committee?
Someone want to make a motion in a second? Do we have Meg, did you make that motion? Or Mike?
I can just a motion for us to add contract to language that just says that at the discretion of the committee, we could choose to extend a deadline for the completion of work if the grantee asks for it. And we see that it's due to delays that's related to the coronavirus pandemic.
Or for any other legitimate reason.
For good cause shown.
Yeah, I like that.
All right.
A lawyer in the room.
So we have a motion, and do we have a second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Who seconded?
Mike Falsetti.
Thank you.
And does this mean you're leaving it up to me then to just put 1 month deadline, 1 month buffer for the final deadline, so there is a specific?
Yeah, yeah. Establish, you know, deadlines with the, you know, with the applicants. You know, what they tell you they think it's going to be 6 months. Give them 7 months, and then put some other language in there. Or do we have, what's next? Do you have any more?
Armor and Co.
That's everything on the merry-go-round?
Yeah, now I can't find my Armor and Co. one.
So
We've got Armor and we've got the Holyoke Housing Authority.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we have 2 more.
Which one do we want to do first?
Well, I'm looking at the Holyoke Housing Authority, and I think there's a really important point that got brought up.
Then let's go with that one.
And
Go ahead. What do you have?
if this is not already covered by other conditions, I think, you know, in red at the bottom of the first or the second column is, should some restrictions be added to ensure that the properties remain affordable? And I think that absolutely they should. You know, we're funding this so that there is affordable housing. And I think, in fact, when they presented to us, it was very clear that both the Housing Authority and Habitat contemplated that owners of these properties should not be able to have them appreciate to market rate and then capture the gain of reselling them at market rate.
Right.
That was, and I think that we do need to figure out a way to make sure that that is in the agreement and is enforceable. And I know that there are various housing programs that operate that way. I'm not familiar with them, but I'm sure that there's language we can steal from someplace.
Right. Well, I think they have that language right from the what do they call it? The Churchill development on those properties. Didn't Mike Manville mention that, you know, that there's, so they've got the boilerplate for it. We just want, I think, in our agreement to say that they will restrict future ownership of that.
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy to be mirroring what they're requiring anyway. I just think that we need to make it clear in our conditions.
I agree. So
that might be included in, I don't know if that's already included in the affordable housing restriction that they need to record, but if it's not, it would be great if you could write something up for me, Mimi.
Well, I think that I would just borrow whatever the housing authority or the legal department already has for it. Um, but if it's already there, that's great. If it isn't already there, we should find it from whatever city agency is likely to have it, or whatever housing agency, and just track their language. I don't know off the top of my head how these things commonly work. I just know that there are provisions that guarantee against the capture by private owner of any appreciation in housing stock over their ownership period.
So is that clear, Amy? What Mimi is saying is, we would like to see some language in our agreement with the Holyoke Housing Authority that is.
It may even be in their initial
Right.
application to us.
So we just want it in there to make sure that in their documents, it's there.
Okay, it just would help if somebody could just state what, I mean, one thing, for example, I want to know, is this only for, do you only want this to be for 100% average median, only those people eligible, or should it be even less, like 80%? And I'd have to look back at their application to see what they said.
Ask.
Yeah, I have no idea about that.
Ask them what they want.
Well, my point is just that this is different from the other housing proposal that we heard back in the day, in that the one that Mike Moriarty presented to us deliberately contemplated that this would be sold at an affordable price, and then the family that bought it would be able to sell it after some period at market rate. Mm-hmm. This proposal is to keep it at market rate. So there have to be provisions that guarantee that it will remain market rate housing, and that if the original owners sell, they cannot sell for an unreasonably appreciated price, or if they do, those funds come back into the agency in some way. As I say, I don't know what mechanic they had in mind, but they had something in mind, and we should just make sure it's in the conditions. And if that requires going back to them or back to the application to figure out exactly what they want.
Okay, I didn't remember, I do understand you, but I didn't remember that this was market rate housing. I thought it was affordable.
No, it is affordable housing. And it was the other application that they were contemplating eventually going to market rate.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And since it will be owned by a private owner, we need to make sure that the usual rules of private property don't apply here.
Okay, I see.
Amy, let me know if you're having difficulty getting that language in an agreement, and I'll help, work with Matt.
Yeah. I'll see if I can pull out the application and see if I can find anything that is clearer.
And would this be perpetual then?
Yeah, I would think.
No.
For some period of time, I don't know how long.
There is a period of time. We have that, and it's almost boilerplate. It's almost driven by the feds. They give you, if you're the first owner, you have to own it for at least 5 or 10 years before you can sell it at the market rate. Otherwise, no, you can't sell it at that. You can sell it what you bought it for. We have that in all our contracts. There's state and federal legislation that dictate that. I mean, Matt has all the minutia detail, Mimi, that you're looking for. I don't have it off the top of my head. But all the agreements we have like that are specifically like that. This is not a turnover, a flip over.
Right. No, there's no way that the federal or state government is allowing, someone to buy a house for $120,000 and then 6 months later flip it for $300, put $180 in their pocket. Right. They figured that out. Yeah. So all we want is the language to make sure it's in our grant agreement that is under control.
Yeah, I think that the city solicitor office will have to come up with that language, but I'll just convey what you think.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I noticed deadlines here. you know, and again, I think, I don't know what their proposal was when they expected to, you know, have these two houses complete. My guess is they were going to build them both at the same time.
Yeah, they said in 12 months, but I'm just, yeah, maybe if they're doing it at the same time, then that question I had is.
Yeah. So I think we could probably just say must be completed in 12 months from time of signed contract. And again, that language about it can be extended due to, you know, the pandemic or other reasonable.
Right, and also the final deadline of a month beyond
Sure, buy them a little more time.
deadline.
Anything else? The disbursement process, we're all set on that, right?
Yeah.
I just have a question. So in answer, like I just asked something. So in other words, they're saying it will be, that they can do this in 12 months. You're saying that in the contract that I should give them an extra month as the final deadline?
We just passed that. I mean, we just voted on that procedure moments ago, Mr. Chairman. At a reason, if you come to us with a reasonable explanation, as Megan pointed out, yeah.
Right. So I think you can keep it at 12 months. You don't need to give them an extra month on this project. And then if they want to request, we'll, you know, we're going to, if they're under construction with these things and they come and say, you know, we're going to be 45 days late, it rained all spring, or, you know, the pandemic reared its ugly head again and, you know, shut down construction for 4 months. We're behind schedule. We're going to say, yeah, go ahead.
Earlier, when I just want to clarify, because earlier when we were talking about the Holyoke merry-go-round, Kip, you said that it's good to have an actual deadline as the maximum, like a date. An actual date.
Yeah.
I said, okay, so give them a date, 1 month from the total, like they said 6 to 8 months. So you want an actual date. So there would be an actual date, but it could just be based on what they said, 8 months.
Yes.
As the maximum. Okay. All right. So not this 1 month buffer thing. Okay.
Right. So what do we have? We have one more to go. Anything less on that one? On the.
Do you want to require any? I put under reports. I just don't know this. Would it be appropriate to require any info on the home buyer to be included in the report? I don't know.
No.
Is it an invasion of privacy or what?
Yes. No, we don't need to know. That's not our job.
Okay. Do you all agree?
I agree with Mike.
Okay. All right, so then I guess we're up to the last one, Armor and Company. I sent you a new chart for this one because I got a revised budget from them. So I guess, let's see. I don't know if we need to discuss anything here. I'm just looking through it. This project has a lengthy timeline for more than 1 year, 13 months. Do you want any interim report after the first 6 months or no?
I don't. Does anybody want one?
Mr. Chairman, if they could send us a brief couple of paragraphs, nothing elaborate, just an overview of the status of the project, to forward it to Amy and she can include it in our board packet whenever it's ready. Nothing detailed, but just an overall report.
Okay, then easy enough. Amy, you're good with that? You understand what Mike Falsetti's saying?
Status report, yeah, after maybe like the first 6 months, that's fine.
Sure.
I keep hearing my own voice echoed on one of your computers.
We do too.
Yeah, I think it's the Holyoke media sign, because every time somebody speaks, that little thing lights up.
Right.
So I don't know if that person can mute that.
Oh, I just muted it. Okay, I think that's all.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been happening all meeting.
Okay. All right. I didn't know that. I didn't know that I could do that. All right.
We're good now. Thank you. Thank you for figuring that out, Marco. I wish you'd done that an hour and a half ago.
I told my husband to go turn down the TV.
Yeah, it wasn't you.
I know.
Right.
I thought he was able to.
I don't want to be rude at the beginning of the meeting and say, who's got their TV on? Turn it off. But it was.
I think he can't,
no.
but I can do it. Okay.
So we have, so was that the end? So we're on Armor and Company. Was there anything else there that we needed to,
I don't think so.
in the conditions?
Again, they're just, I'm educating, I'm trying to let them think over the preservation restriction and all that. So that's what's happening.
All right. Well, you know, there may be, look, this is negotiations of contracts, and so there may be other terms that come up for future meeting. We can deal with them then. You have to. All right. Is that anything else on conditions? Anybody have they want to, or can we check off that? Agenda item number 8. I mean 7. Sorry. Okay, so we'll jump to agenda item 8, which is cost of recording preservation restrictions. Amy,
Yeah, as I said, I don't think this is really, I was worried about this, but I've gotten more clarity on it from the city solicitor office. And as I said, the cost is usually, we believe, about $105. And I was concerned that it might be unusual to have them have to pay for it, but it turns out that I checked with Jenna Wellhoff, and she said that she's seen that many contracts do do require the grant recipient to cover the cost for recording the restriction. So she thinks that it's fine for us to do it that way.
All right, good. So anybody else have any comments on cost of preservation restriction agenda item? No. All right, so we're going to move to other, correct? Is that? And Rosemary, you said you had a GluTech update you wanted to?
Yeah, just a quick one. So I did get an email today from the Yoni at the Conservation Commission. And so he's working with Kestrel. It should be voted on July 23rd, which is our next meeting. In the meantime, that would be the conservation restriction that Kestrel's putting together. And so it, we're getting closer and closer to a final project. And then, that should wind it up. One of the good things that came out of all this is that Yoni is in touch with out of the Berkshire, it's called Greenagers. They're young teenagers that are working in the fields of putting in trails and things. And so we're gonna see if we can get Kestrel to bring them down this way and work with some of the Holyoke youth along with the Berkshire youth. And we have a lot of ATV damage out there, which we seem to be doing better with. And so we would like to bring these teenagers into, and we're hoping to get some of the neighborhood kids to help us to restore that area and maybe put in some bridges and things where there is wetlands so that it doesn't get impacted. So there's lots of good stuff going on, and the new conservation commissioner for Holyoke is very, very good.
Who is that?
His name is Yoni I can never say Goldweiger, I think. It's something like that. But anyway, he's young, he's innovative, and he's doing a lot of work with Andrew, the past administrator, and getting some good projects done. But yeah, he's
good.
He's great, a great new person in Holyoke. So
cool. Well,
happy to have that.
Anybody else have anything on the other that they wanted to?
Yeah, I do. Amy, if you don't mind, I sent you an email just a little while ago. But I have I'm the representative from the Holyoke Historical Commission, and we have a meeting next week. And if you could, I know you send out lots of information all the time, but if you could maybe send me a little like Holyoke Historical Commission packet, just so I could show them the historic related projects. And maybe, I don't know if there's a document that has, an explanation of the historic preservation that we're looking for. Like, I just want to be able to, put forth an update on, historic related projects to the commission.
Yeah.
For the newest ones or all of them?
Well, gosh, like I don't want to make it a real chore, but
Well, I can easily send you a sample preservation restriction.
yeah, that would be great.
So that it's not an actual one that, because we haven't had any applicant agree to them yet, but I can send you just the sample one from the Mass Historic Commission so you can see
Okay.
details. And also I can, and I mean, I could even you can even look at these charts that I've sent you that have a description of each project.
So I can, if you've already, I know that you've previously sent lots of information. I just wasn't sure how easy it was going to be to find or how easy it is for you to send me the most current one. But if you have a moment and can just send me the current historic applications, then that way I can just go over them with the commission. And
you mean a summary of the applications,
a
right?
summary. Yeah. It doesn't have to be the actual application. I think they just will want to know, you know, these are the historic related projects, you know, the Lady Liberty, I'm not,
Sure.
That'd be awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much for doing that.
No problem. Yeah. I also want to give a quick update that on the stained glass project for has been done for the FY19 project, and I already got information from Bob Parent to reimburse him for the cost for his vendors.
Great.
So those windows have been put in apparently.
Wow.
On the
I look
Oh
forward to
yeah.
seeing
If you had
pictures.
something on that, that'd be great.
So he's going to work on the report. That's the next thing, which submit.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anybody have anything they want to add to our meeting at this point?
We want to discuss the date of the next meeting.
Yes.
Always a good idea.
So, so nothing left on tonight's meeting. Nobody has anything they want to add. So let's talk about our next meeting. And I'm assuming that sooner rather than later, we're going to have to give some consideration to these housing assistance applications. And this might be a full meeting in of itself, just kind of getting our heads around that. I can't claim that I do understand kind of where we are and, you know, but, you know, go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, there's something, you just reminded me that we did get, and I sent this to everybody, but I know you get a lot of emails from the CPA Coalition. There was something about the like 20 million has gone towards rental assistance, and like 59% of that money has come from CPA communities. And also there was a report about this, which you might want to skim it just to get an idea of what's, been done, and that might help inform you when you review those applications.
So an idea, and only an idea, is that, maybe we dedicate our next meeting. We have a couple small things tabled, like the MIFA preservation. I can't imagine that's going to take more than 5 minutes to talk about, because really, the solicitor's office is going to have to sign off on the language. So my recommendation is, that's the route that they take, and then just let us know that that's, that they've reached an agreement. And, if we want to, maybe approve that language as a committee, are we comfortable with that? That might be an agenda item for our next meeting. But, we'll have some meeting minutes to review and approve probably. But I don't, I think, we may have something on the small grant application. But I think we have kind of a small agenda for, right now for the next meeting. And so it might be an opportunity to maybe bring, invite that, the affordable housing applicants that we have in front of us now to come, to have a meeting and see where they are. When do they need us to, take action on their applications? What do they, and so Mike Sullivan, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I'll reach out in the interim here to Alicia Zoller and then if necessary, invite her to the meeting.
Yeah.
But as I understand, there's a tremendous amount of money that's been made available through Community Development Block Grant.
Right.
From what I'm seeing so far, I don't think there will be any need for CPA funds, but I could be wrong on that, but that's the way it's looking right now. But I'll definitely reach out on that and have some good answers. And if there is something going on where we might have a need, I think Alicia would be a good one to get in for the meeting also.
Well, I'm in full agreement. So maybe, Michael Moriarty, Stephen Huntley, and Alicia, and anybody else that we can think of, and just have a free-flowing discussion about, where they are. Do they need CPA money? If they do, when do they need it, and when would we have to take any action, assuming that we'll approve to vote for, housing assistance, which is a big assumption.
Will we also have an update at that meeting as part of that conversation around what the receipts have been so far from tax collections in the first quarter? Because we discussed really wanting to extrapolate to some extent. I mean, I know it's not right. It's like a little of course it's apples and oranges, but to be able to extrapolate to some extent what we think collections really might be next year, so we can figure out how much we think we would have.
Right. Mike Sullivan, what was you were going to say something in response to that?
Yeah, so far we heard from Kate Chakowski, and so far tax collections have been pretty much on par. So
good.
Even from commercial entities?
I haven't
got
it divided up, but
Okay.
So Amy, can you check with collector's office and get an update? Just maybe a week or so before our next meeting, which isn't scheduled yet, but just if you could do that, and we'll have that information for Megan. That'll be part of the discussion.
Yep.
Okay. So everybody kind of on board with that idea of having?
I'm wondering, do you want to discuss the applications before you invite the applicants in?
I don't know how other people feel. I mean, the application is there, but really, I think I think I have a lot of questions. Mike touched on them. Like, is there other money that are available? How great is the need for CPA money to be used this way, which in normal times it wouldn't likely be, projects that we would be voting for. I don't know if I can say that or not, but I know that there are members of this committee who have serious concerns about using CPA money to fund rental housing assistance instead of other housing projects, open space projects, historic restoration projects, because there may be other pools of money available. So why use CPA money? And I'm not stating my position. I'm just, reading some of the questions that I'm picking up between the lines, and some thoughts that I have myself, So I think maybe just at our next meeting, we have the applications. We can review them, ourselves personally, and then, be prepared to listen and be updated. It'd probably be close to 90 days since our last update about those things from the applicants, and see where they are. And I think Alicia would be very helpful to be there, to tell us what, from her view, what's happening with this program and how important the CPA funds would be or not.
Also, of course, this is a rapidly changing environment. And, I think gathering information, having the next meeting to discuss what we've learned, and then going from there makes sense to me.
Okay. So
can we just make sure that we don't vote on anything when there is an applicant there.
Here, here.
I just think that it creates a sense for me of discomfort.
Well, but these are public meetings. Don't forget, these are public. How do you tell an applicant they can come to a public meeting? I don't know that you can do that.
I know that other boards and commissions have a routine around asking them to step out and then come back in. I don't know. I mean, maybe there's no way because it's public is public, but I just know that in the past, there sometimes have been times where someone is sitting right next to you.
Right.
At a table, and it's, I don't know.
Applicants are there, you know, because it does influence people. And so, yeah.
Public is public, but I would say it makes sense not to vote the same evening that we've had a discussion.
Yeah.
With the applicant there, because a lot of the time there's new information and it is worthwhile to have a certain cooling off and thinking about it period before we have to make a final decision.
Good point.
And
okay,
so addresses some of Meg's concern, I hope.
Yes, no, I think that feels good.
Yeah, I hope I didn't give you the impression that I think that, you know, we should be taking action and all, you know, at the next meeting, whenever that is, about these applications. You know, I can't imagine they're going to come in and say, I need you guys to vote on this. If that was coming, I would expect they would have already communicated that to us, and I haven't heard that. So, so let's talk.
Yeah.
Let's talk about when we want to meet next. You know, it is the summer. You know, I have to tell you, I was on the golf course earlier today when I got an email and I was like, oh my God, I got a meeting tonight. I almost forgot. So, you know, it's the summer. We're all doing different things. I mean, you know, so when do we want to meet again? We want to meet in August, or we want to skip and go to September and take August off? We've had a lot of meetings. People have worked really hard here. So, and I'm willing to do August. I just want to.
Yeah, no, I think that a check-in in August is probably a good idea, simply because, again, you know, I am dying to have as few meetings as possible. I have a ton of meetings,
right.
But I also think that we're in the middle of a bunch of national crises and things are happening fast. And just even if it's half an hour of here's where we are.
Okay, I'm supportive of that. So what do we want to do for our meeting in August? We want to do an early August. You know, what have we been doing? We've been doing the
today's the 8th.
Wednesdays, first or second Wednesday. I can't remember which today is.
Second Wednesday in August would be the 12th. The first is the first Wednesday is the 5th.
Okay, so what's people's preference? What do you want to do?
I'd say the 12th, mid-August. Well, we probably will know something.
Mr. Chairman, I would say the 12th too. Okay,
anybody have any issues at this point, conflicts, or, okay, let's shoot for that. So, and so, you know, I like the practice of discussing the agenda a little bit before, you know, we tabled some things. We all know what those were. And then we talked about the, you know, bringing in, having a discussion about rental assistance program. Anything else anybody want to add to the agenda? I mean, do we
need to do anything about like a public meeting? Is that, I don't know. I'm just thinking, are there things that we're supposed to be thinking about that we're not thinking about in terms of like going into the fall? Do we have to start planning things?
That's a good point, because we never did have that public meeting because of the pandemic, and now I guess we can't.
Right.
Unless it were
maybe not.
We kind of can. We just have to do it over Zoom if we're going to do it.
Yeah.
So maybe we don't talk about it in August, but like in September, maybe we have to devote a significant chunk of a meeting to talking about like, what does public outreach look like?
Yeah.
Like, how do we get a survey out there? How do we get some public, you know, feedback?
Right.
Yeah, I had actually created an entire survey which was ready for that day when we were.
For that day. So I just think something like that, you know, granted, not so much like which ones from this night do you want us to fund, but
right.
You know, here are projects we have funded. Give us feedback.
Yeah.
Something on that.
We need some excitement. The last public hearing on chickens got like 50 people.
But what happened? Can I have chickens or no?
We're working on it.
Well, I've already got 'em.
Inclusive.
So the answer is not legally right now.
Not legally right now, but my hope seriously is that all of the concerns can be addressed in ways that will satisfy everybody. But there are real concerns, and they do have to be addressed.
Cool.
Chairman, do we have a date for next do we have our meeting set now?
Yep.
Yes.
Good.
Okay.
Same time, 6 o'clock. What was the date?
August 12th?
August 12th.
The 12th?
Yes.
Right, and it was helpful when you sent the agenda closer to the meeting and asked if there was anything to add, because since I'm in touch with the applicants, sometimes there is something.
Right. So what I'll do is I'll send out the draft agenda in the next day or so. And then, anybody feel free at any time to just suggest proposed changes to their additions or deletions from the agenda. And then a week or so before the meeting, Amy, I'll try to send another one. But if I don't send another one, just use the one I sent and, have Ryan post that. Okay, so if you don't get an amended one from me, use the original.
Or if you have things to add to it, then just let Kip know.
Right, if there's some, let me know and we'll tweak it.
We'll add it.
Okay.
But it's a summer.
Yeah.
And even in this crazy
And I'm
world,
in South Carolina, so.
I'm still trying to kick back and enjoy the summer.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm not necessarily on top of things like I would be normally. All right, anybody have anything else?
Happy summer.
Happy summer, yeah.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in
Amen.
favor?
Thank you all. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good
Have a
night.
nice evening. Have a great summer until August. Bye.
Yeah.
Everyone, bye.